The night was heavy with silence in the wealthy neighborhood of Greenwich, Connecticut. Behind the tall iron gates and perfectly trimmed hedges stood the majestic home of Andrew Collins, a self-made millionaire whose life had been shattered just months earlier. Once celebrated as a brilliant entrepreneur, Andrew now lived surrounded by wealth but suffocated by loneliness. The tragic death of his beloved wife, Emily, in a sudden car accident had left him devastated, and even worse, it left his two young children 7-year-old twins named Ethan and Ella crying themselves to sleep night after night, despite the grand chandelier hanging in the foyer, the marble floors, and the luxurious bedrooms decorated with every toy imaginable. The house felt hollow. No amount of money could bring back the laughter Emily used to spread in every corner of their home. Andrew tried his best to stay strong, but deep down he was breaking. His twins couldn't sleep. They tossed and turned every night, their tiny voices whispering for their mother, their small hands clutching pillows soaked in tears. And while Andrew loved them fiercely, his own grief paralyzed him, leaving him helpless to comfort them the way they needed. That's where the unlikeliest person entered, their lives a poor cleaning lady named Maria. She had just been hired through a local agency to help keep the Collins mansion in order. Maria lived in a tiny rented apartment across town, barely able to pay her bills. She worked multiple jobs, often skipping meals just to make sure her teenage son had enough to eat. When she walked into Andrew's mansion for the first time, her worn-out sneakers squeaked against the polished marble floors, and she felt completely out of place among the golden-framed paintings and crystal vases. Maria knew her place. She wasn't there to mingle, only to clean. But life has a way of placing ordinary people in extraordinary moments, and that's exactly what was about to happen. Because on her very first night, while scrubbing the floors in the hallway, she heard soft sobs echoing down the corridor. She hesitated, clutching her mop, before slowly following the sound. What she discovered would change not only the twins' lives but also her own forever. Ethan and Ella sat together in their shared bedroom, their small bodies trembling, eyes swollen from crying. They looked so fragile, so broken, despite being surrounded by toys most kids could only dream of. Maria stood at the door, unsure if she should leave or step in. Something inside her whispered, "Don't walk away." She couldn't. She recognized that cry, the cry of children aching for comfort, the same way her son used to cry when his father abandoned them. Without thinking twice, she softly walked into the room, her voice gentle and warm. At first, the twins were startled. They had only seen Maria briefly during the day. To them, she was just the lady who dusted the furniture. But that night, something was different. Maria didn't rush to hush them, nor did she tell them to stop crying. Instead, she sat down on the rug beside their beds, crossed her legs, and simply listened. She asked them softly what was wrong, and when they finally spoke, their words poured out like water breaking through a dam. They missed their mom. They couldn't sleep without her. Every night felt like an endless nightmare. Maria's heart ached. She couldn't replace their mother. No one could, but she could offer something she had plenty of: kindness. She began to tell them a story, one she used to tell her own son when life got too heavy. A story about a brave little bird who lost its way but learned to fly again because it never gave up. Her voice, though simple, carried warmth and sincerity, and slowly the twins' tears began to dry. Within minutes, their eyelids grew heavy, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan and Ella fell asleep peacefully. Maria remained seated long after they drifted off, tears stinging her eyes. She hadn't planned to get involved, but fate had pulled her into their pain. Little did she know that small act of compassion was just the beginning of something far greater. A moment that seemed so ordinary would turn into a bond that no wealth, no status, and no tragedy could ever break. And here's where the story takes a surprising turn. Because what happened the next morning, when Andrew discovered that his twins had finally slept through the night, thanks to the cleaning lady, would not only test his pride, but also force him to confront the deepest wounds of his own heart. But before we continue, pause for a moment. Have you ever experienced a time when someone unexpected changed your life in ways you never imagined? Maybe a teacher, a stranger, or even a friend who showed up in your darkest hour. Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. And if this story is touching your heart, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Trust me, what comes next will surprise you even more. The morning sunlight streamed through the Collins mansion's massive windows, casting golden rays across the dining room where Andrew sat alone, staring blankly at his untouched coffee. He had barely slept again, tossing between memories of his late wife and the heavy responsibility of raising 2 children without her. His assistants, the housekeepers, the nannies, none of them had been able to help the twins rest. Every attempt had failed. The children still woke up sobbing, desperate for a mother who would never return. But this morning was different. Andrew was shocked when he walked into the twins' room at dawn and found them still asleep, their little faces calm, no tear stains on their cheeks, no nightmares pulling them from their dreams. For the first time in months, his children were at peace. Confused and curious, Andrew quietly asked one of the staff what had happened. That's when he learned that Maria, the cleaning lady, had been the one to sit with them, comfort them, and tell them a story until they drifted off. At first, Andrew felt a strange mix of gratitude and pride. Gratitude that someone had finally broken through his children's pain, but pride that whispered, "Why couldn't you do that yourself? Why did it take a stranger?" He rubbed his temples, torn between admiration for Maria's compassion and frustration at his own helplessness as a father. Later that morning, while Maria quietly folded laundry in the laundry room, Andrew stepped inside. His presence filled the space, tall, commanding, dressed in an expensive tailored suit. Maria immediately straightened, nervous. She wasn't used to speaking directly with employers like him. She expected criticism, maybe even to be scolded for crossing boundaries by entering the children's room. But Andrew surprised her. His voice was calm, almost hesitant. He thanked her, not in a casual way, but in a deeply sincere tone that carried the weight of a grieving father. "I don't know how you did it," he admitted, "but they slept for the first time in months. I owe you more than you know." Maria lowered her eyes, embarrassed. She didn't want credit. She had simply followed her heart, something she believed every mother or anyone who had known deep pain would have done. She told him it was nothing, just a story, just listening. But Andrew knew better. It wasn't just a story. It was presence, empathy, something money could never buy. Over the next few days, Maria's role in the household began to quietly change. She still cleaned, polished the silver, dusted the grand piano, but every evening she found herself in the twins' room. Ethan and Ella no longer cried themselves to sleep. Instead, they waited eagerly for Miss Maria to arrive. She would sit with them on the soft rug, sometimes reading a fairy tale from the shelf, sometimes inventing stories about magical forests or brave heroes who learned to heal their hearts. Other times, she simply listened to their memories of their mom, their fears about the dark, their worries about school, and Andrew noticed. Each night, he would linger outside their bedroom door, listening to Maria's gentle voice, hearing his children giggle softly again for the first time since Emily's death. Each night, he felt his heart soften just a little. He wasn't jealous anymore. He was grateful. He realized that Maria wasn't replacing him or Emily. She was giving his children what they needed most, the feeling that they were not alone in their grief. One Saturday morning, as autumn leaves painted the streets of Greenwich in fiery shades of red and orange, Andrew invited Maria to join him and the twins for breakfast. Maria hesitated. She wasn't sure if it was appropriate. She was just the cleaning lady, and she had always kept her professional distance. But Andrew insisted, and the twins begged her to sit with them. Nervously, she agreed. That breakfast became a turning point. For the first time in a long while, the dining table was filled with laughter. Ethan spilled orange juice, Ella teased her brother, and Maria gently wiped their little hands with napkins while telling them funny stories about her son back home. Andrew watched silently, his chest tightening. The sound of laughter had been missing from this house for too long, and now, here it was thanks to the woman sitting across from him, who didn't even belong to this world of wealth. But the truth was, Maria carried something far more valuable than money could ever buy. Authenticity. And as the days turned into weeks, Andrew began to rely on her presence. He noticed details he hadn't before, the way Maria always wore the same worn sneakers, because she couldn't afford new ones. The way she skipped meals sometimes and only pretended she wasn't hungry. The tiredness in her eyes that revealed she carried burdens of her own. She wasn't just helping his children. She was fighting her own battles every single day. One evening, while Maria was leaving the mansion, she received a phone call. Her voice trembled as she spoke in Spanish, unaware that Andrew overheard part of the conversation. He didn't understand all of it, but he caught words like rent, late, and school fees. That night, Andrew couldn't stop thinking about her. She was carrying the weight of poverty, yet she still gave so freely of her heart to his children. The next day, Andrew discreetly asked his assistant to check on Maria's situation. What he discovered humbled him. Maria lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a rough neighborhood. She worked 3 jobs cleaning houses, waitressing at a diner, and babysitting just to provide for her teenage son, Daniel. Despite everything, she never complained. Andrew felt something stir inside him, a responsibility not just to his children, but to the woman who had become their anchor. He wanted to help her, but he wasn't sure how to do it without wounding her pride. And here's where the story deepens. Because while Andrew struggled to figure out how to support Maria, something unexpected happened. Ethan and Ella, without anyone telling them, started drawing pictures of Maria alongside their family. In their innocent eyes, she wasn't just the cleaning lady anymore. She was part of them. But this new bond wasn't something everyone accepted. Soon, whispers began among the mansion staff. Rumors spread in the community, and even Andrew's wealthy friends started to question his choices. Could a millionaire truly allow his children to bond so closely with someone so far beneath his social class? The answer would test Andrew's character in ways he had never imagined. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt judged for who you chose to keep in your life? Whether a friend, a partner, or even someone who helped you in a way others couldn't understand. Share your experiences in the comments, because your story might inspire someone else watching this. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the next chapter of this story will reveal a dramatic twist that changes everything. Autumn deepened in Greenwich, and with each falling leaf, Maria's bond with Ethan and Ella grew stronger. The twins no longer dreaded bedtime. Instead, they eagerly awaited their nightly ritual with Miss Maria. She read to them, sang softly in Spanish, and sometimes let them help invent stories where they became the heroes. For the first time since their mother's passing, the twins began to smile again, not just little smiles, but genuine bursts of laughter that filled the mansion's halls. Andrew saw it all. He began to notice the subtle ways his children were healing. They were more confident at school, more playful in the yard, and even more affectionate toward him. For months, he had felt like he was losing them to grief. But now, thanks to Maria, he felt them slowly returning. But not everyone was happy about this. Changed. At a charity gala in New York City, where Andrew was a guest of honor, whispers spread among the wealthy attendees. Andrew's children had been seen around town with the help. Some of his so-called friends raised eyebrows, questioning whether it was appropriate for a millionaire's children to be so attached to a cleaning lady. "It's not good for appearances," one woman in a diamond necklace muttered. "Children shouldn't confuse staff with family," another man whispered. Andrew clenched his jaw. He hated the way they spoke, as if Maria's kindness was less valuable than their money. For the first time in a long while, he didn't care what the social elite thought. They hadn't been there at night, holding his children's hands as they cried. They hadn't seen the healing Maria brought into his home. Back at the mansion, however, things weren't smooth either. A few of the staff grew resentful. Some complained privately that Maria was overstepping, spending too much time with the children instead of focusing on her chores. Others envied the trust Andrew showed her. The tension grew silently in the household, but Maria Humble has always kept her focus on Ethan and Ella. She didn't want conflict. She only wanted the children to feel loved. One chilly November evening, as the first snowflakes of the season dusted the streets, Maria arrived late. Her son Daniel had been struggling in school, and she stayed behind to help him with homework before catching the late bus to the mansion. By the time she arrived, Ethan and Ella were already waiting in their pajamas, their little faces pressed against the window, worried that she might not come. When she finally walked through the door, they ran to her, hugging her legs tightly. That night, Maria shared a news story about a snowflake that thought it was too small to matter. But in the end, it was the snowflake that made the world sparkle. The twins listened with wide eyes, and by the time she finished, they had drifted into peaceful dreams. Andrew stood quietly in the hallway, watching. His chest ached, not with grief this time, but with admiration. He realized he hadn't just hired a cleaner. He had been given a blessing, a gift he hadn't known he needed. And yet, he worried. How long could this last? What if Maria found a better job? What if she left and the twins had to start all over again? One evening, Andrew tried to express his gratitude. He asked Maria to sit with him in the study, a grand room lined with shelves of leather-bound books and a roaring fireplace. Maria sat nervously on the edge of the leather chair, her hands folded in her lap. Andrew leaned forward, his eyes soft but serious. "You've done more for my children than anyone else has since Emily passed," he admitted. "I don't know how to thank you." Maria shook her head quickly. "Please, Mr. Collins, you don't owe me anything. I'm just doing what any mother would do." But Andrew wasn't convinced. He wanted to help her, to ease her struggles, but he knew she was proud. He had seen the way she worked tirelessly, never asking for favors, never accepting more than what she earned. Offering charity might hurt her dignity. As he debated within himself, fate forced his hand. One night, while Maria was on her way home, the bus she usually took broke down. With no other option, she walked through the freezing streets to her apartment. By the time she arrived, she was shivering, her shoes soaked, her coat too thin for the biting cold. Daniel, her teenage son, opened the door and rushed to help her inside. That night, Maria fell ill with a high fever. The next morning, when she didn't show up for work, Ethan and Ella panicked. They begged their father to call her. Andrew tried, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Something in his gut told him something was wrong. Without hesitation, he asked his driver to take him to Maria's neighborhood. When he arrived, he was stunned. The apartment building was crumbling. The hallway lights flickered, and the heating barely worked. He knocked on Maria's door, and when Daniel opened it, Andrew saw Maria lying weakly on the couch, pale and coughing. In that moment, Andrew's heart broke. The woman who had poured so much love into his children was suffering in silence, carrying burdens she never spoke of. He knew he couldn't stand by anymore. He helped her sit up, insisting she see a doctor, but Maria resisted. "I can't afford it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'll be fine," Andrew wouldn't take no for an answer. He arranged immediate care for her, paying for everything without her consent. But what moved him most was how Daniel, despite his young age, tried so hard to protect his mother. He reminded Andrew of Ethan and Ella Innocent, vulnerable yet brave. Back at the mansion, the twins waited anxiously for news. When Andrew told them Maria was sick but getting help, they cried. "We need her, Daddy," Ella said softly. "Please don't let anything happen to her." In that moment, Andrew realized the truth. Maria wasn't just a cleaning lady anymore. She had become family dot, and yet the world around them was about to test that bond. Rumors spread faster, now neighbors whispered. Gossip ran wild, and even members of Andrew's business circle began questioning his judgment. Was it proper for a millionaire to entangle his life with a poor cleaning woman? The tension was rising, and soon Andrew would face a choice that would change not only his life, but the future of his children. But let me ask you something before we continue. Have you ever seen someone silently struggling while giving their all to others? Did you step in to help, or did you hesitate? Share your answer in the comments, because your voice might remind someone watching that compassion always matters. And if this story has touched you so far, subscribe and share it so more people can see that kindness can change everything. Winter settled heavily over Greenwich, blanketing the city in silence. The Collins mansion looked as picturesque as a holiday. Card wreaths hung on the doors. Golden lights wrapped around the tall pine trees in the yard, and the fireplace inside roared against the cold. To outsiders, Andrew's life looked perfect. A successful millionaire with 2 beautiful children, celebrating Christmas in luxury. But behind the scenes, tension brewed like a storm. Maria had recovered from her illness, thanks to Andrew's intervention. But her absence had exposed something deeper. Ethan and Ella couldn't bear the thought of losing her again. They clung to her, begging her never to leave. Their drawings now included her in every family picture. Maria holding their hands, Maria cooking with them, Maria reading stories by the fireplace. To the twins, she was more than a helper. She was the missing piece of their broken hearts. Andrew saw it too. He couldn't deny that Maria had filled the void Emily left in ways he never could. Her patience, her humility, her warmth, it wasn't just healing the children. It was healing him. Yet, as his feelings grew, so did the scrutiny around him. Not at a prestigious business luncheon in Manhattan, Andrew's longtime associate, Richard Whitman, leaned across the table. "Andrew," he said in a low voice, "you're making a mistake. People are talking. This cleaning lady, what's her name? Maria? She's getting too close to your children. It doesn't look good. For your family's reputation, for your business. You need to draw a line." Andrew's jaw tightened. "She's helping my kids, Richard. That's all that matters." But Richard wasn't satisfied. He pressed harder. "Appearances matter. Investors, partners, they notice things. And let's be honest, she doesn't belong in your world. She'll only drag you down." Those words cut deep. Andrew hated himself for even listening, but they lingered in his mind. Could Richard be right? Could his children's bond with Maria jeopardize everything he'd built? He shook the thought away, but doubts whispered in the quiet corners of his mind. Meanwhile, Maria herself began to feel the weight of judgment. One afternoon, as she picked up groceries at the local store, she overheard 2 women whispering. "Isn't she the maid at the Collins house?" One asked. "Imagine acting like she's part of the family. Some people don't know their place." Maria lowered her eyes, gripping the basket tighter. She had never sought anything beyond her job. She never wanted to overstep. All she wanted was to help 2 grieving children sleep at night. Yet now her presence was stirring gossip she never asked for. That evening, Maria considered pulling back. She told herself she should keep her distance, stick strictly to her duties. But when she walked into the twins' room and saw their eager faces light up, her resolve melted. She couldn't abandon them. They needed her too much. Christmas Eve arrived, and the mansion buzzed with activity. Staff decorated the enormous tree in the grand living room. Gifts were stacked high beneath it, and carols played softly in the background. Andrew wanted the holiday to be magical for his children, their first without their mother. Yet, despite the glittering lights, he felt a shadow hanging over him. That night, as snow fell outside, the Collins family gathered around the tree. Ethan and Ella begged Maria to join them in opening presents. Hesitant, she sat on the rug with them, her heart swelling as they handed her a small box wrapped in shiny paper. "We made this for you," Ella said shyly. Inside was a simple handmade ornament, a heart-shaped piece of cardboard covered in glitter, with the words "Family Forever" written in crayon. Maria's eyes filled with tears. For her, who had so little, it was the most precious gift she had ever received. Andrew watched the moment unfold, his heart heavy with emotion. But just as warmth filled the room, the doorbell rang. Standing there was Richard, uninvited, with his wife. They had stopped by to deliver a holiday gift. As they stepped into the living room, Richard's eyes narrowed at the sight of Maria sitting on the floor, laughing with the children. The tension was immediate. Richard's wife forced a smile, but Richard couldn't hold his tongue. "Andrew," he said sharply, "this is exactly what I was talking about. You're letting your children confuse a servant for family. This," he gestured toward Maria, "is unacceptable." Silence fell. The twins clutched Maria's hands, their eyes wide with fear. Andrew's blood boiled. He stood tall, his voice firm. "Enough, Richard." But before he could say more, Maria rose quietly, her face pale. "He's right," she whispered. "I don't belong here. I've crossed a line. I should go." The twins cried out instantly. "No, don't leave, Miss Maria." Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. Ella sobbed, clinging to Maria's arm. Andrew's heart shattered at the sight. He wanted to stop her, to tell her she was wrong, but Maria's humility was stronger than his words. She gathered her coat, whispered an apology, and slipped out into the snowy night. The mansion fell silent. Ethan and Ella cried themselves to sleep, their ornaments still clutched in their hands. Andrew sat by the fire, long after midnight, staring into the flames, torn between the world's expectations and the truth his heart already knew. For the first time, Andrew realized he was at a crossroads. If he let Maria go, he would protect his reputation, his business, his status. But he would also break his children's hearts and his own. And that's where the real test began. Because sometimes love and healing come from the most unexpected places, and the courage to embrace them is what defines us. But I want to pause here and ask you, have you ever had to choose between what others expected of you and what you knew in your heart was right? What did you do? Share your story in the comments, because your voice might give courage to someone else watching. And don't forget to subscribe and share this video, because the next part will reveal the powerful decision Andrew makes and the ending you won't forget. The night Maria left the Collins mansion, snow fell in heavy silence, blanketing the roads like a shroud. Inside the grand estate, Ethan and Ella cried themselves to sleep, clutching the handmade ornament they had given her. For the first time in weeks, their nightmares returned. They whispered their mother's name, but now they whispered for Maria too. Andrew sat alone in the study, staring into the fire. His mind was a storm. Richard's harsh words echoed in his head. "She doesn't belong in your world. She only dragged you down." But louder than that were the cries of his children, their pleas for the woman who had brought them comfort when no one else could. For hours, Andrew battled his pride, his reputation, his fears. He thought of Emily, his late wife, her compassion, her belief that love mattered more than appearances. He imagined what she would say if she were here, and in that quiet moment, he knew the answer. Emily would have wanted him to choose love, to choose kindness, to choose what healed their family instead of what pleased society. The next morning, Andrew made a decision. He bundled Ethan and Ella into the car and told his driver where to go. The twins didn't know why, but when the car pulled into Maria's crumbling apartment building, their faces lit up with hope. Maria opened the door in surprise, her eyes tired, her face pale. She had barely slept, ashamed of how things had ended, convinced she had lost the children forever. But when she saw them standing there, tears welled in her eyes. Ethan rushed forward first, throwing his arms around her waist. "Please don't leave us, Miss Maria," he begged. Ella joined him, clinging tightly to her hand. Maria's heart broke. "Sweethearts," she whispered, kneeling down to hold them. "I never wanted to leave you. I thought I wasn't good enough." Andrew stepped inside, his voice firm but gentle. "Maria, don't ever say that again. You've given my children something no one else could. You've given them back their joy, their peace. You are more than enough." Maria shook her head, overwhelmed. "But people will talk. Your world and mine, they don't mix. I don't want to ruin your reputation." Andrew knelt beside her, his eyes steady. "I don't care what people say. All that matters is my children, and they love you. I love you, too, for what you've done for them. Maria, you are part of this family, whether the world approves or not." Silence hung in the air. The twins looked between them, their eyes wide, waiting for Maria's answer. Slowly she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "And I'll stay. As long as you'll have me, I'll stay." What followed was nothing short of transformation. Maria moved into the mansion, not as a servant, but as family. At first, the staff resisted.